Who are you when no one is watching? How many versions of yourself have you buried just to fit into the world? And what if this you that you defend so fiercely is nothing more than a role you learned to play, a character carefully crafted to be liked, to survive, to keep your mind from collapsing? Know yourself, the ancients said. But what if that self is not a solid place to arrive at, but a bottomless abyss? Carl Jung once wrote that the greatest problem of the human being is not suffering itself, but the fear of facing oneself. Because self-knowledge is not a pastime. It is not a hobby for quiet afternoons. It is a ritual of death. It means tearing apart the masks you've spent a lifetime manufacturing, looking inward and confronting the possibility that you may not like what you see. At some level, every one of us lies about who we are. We lie with polite smiles, with agreeable answers, with silent choices we never explain. We lie to others, but the cruelest lies are the ones we whisper to ourselves. And within that psychological theater emerges one of the most unsettling truths of Jungian psychology: the archetypes, ancient forces that live within the human soul, as if they were invisible actors. They do not ask permission to enter. They are already there, moving silently beneath your skin. They shape your desires. They sabotage your choices. They whisper in your dreams. They haunt your relationships. You may deny them, but denial does not erase them. Jung did not see them as enemies to destroy, but as living images, ancestral shadows that confront, guide, and, if we dare, transform us. This is an invitation to cross the threshold. 7 archetypes dwell silently in the depths of your unconscious, surfacing in myths, in nightmares, in impulses, and strange repetitions you cannot explain. But this is not a catalogue, nor a lecture to memorize. It is a descent into the raw impact of these inner figures, like broken mirrors reflecting the hidden fragments of yourself. Fragments you've been hiding, even from your own eyes. Nothing here will be sugar-coated. Every word will cut like a blade. Every image will tear open a wound. Individuation, the process of becoming whole, only begins when the soul is ripped apart and you hear, in the silence that follows, the sound of what is real. So breathe deeply. Close your eyes if you must. No matter how much you believe you know yourself, what comes next might disarm you. But it is in the collapse of the persona where the reconstruction of the being begins. Now that you've reached this moment, ask yourself, are you ready to stop pretending? Since childhood, we are trained to smile before we feel, to obey before we understand, to please before we simply exist. At first, it seems harmless. A smile when you hide your anger, a look of disapproval when you dare to disagree, a cold loneliness when you reveal your real sadness. Slowly, you learn. You learn that showing your truth costs too much. You learn that acceptance demands the constant sacrifice of authenticity. Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear to function in the world. And what is most terrifying is that it works. It gives us a name, a social role, a way to be loved. The persona is like a tailored garment, made for the eyes of others. But in time, we forget the shape of the body beneath that clothing, and what once protected us becomes our prison. Think of this. How many times have you said yes when every cell in you wanted to scream no? How many times did you stay silent to avoid disappointing, to avoid conflict, to avoid being too much? How many times have you played the role expected of you, only to be left alone with the haunting question, why am I like this? But perhaps that is not the real question. Perhaps the deeper question is this: what if that I was never you at all. Jung warned that the danger of the persona lies in over-identifying with it, in believing that the mask we show is all that we are. But what about the rest? What about the rage that simmers in silence, the shame that has never been spoken, the forbidden thought you push away, the repressed desire you bury? These things do not vanish. They accumulate like a silent storm, and one day they return as emptiness. That subtle emptiness, that strange sensation of being surrounded by people but feeling utterly alone, of having a functional routine, yet waking each day with no genuine desire to rise, of meeting every external goal and still asking, is this all a well-organized lie? The persona, when it survives too long without contrast, becomes tyrannical. And so we collapse at the peak of success. We sabotage ourselves at the moment of achievement. We destroy bonds that seemed promising. We withdraw from the very structures that once sustained us. On the outside, everything looks fine, but inside, the soul pounds against the walls of the mask. Jung never suggested we destroy the persona. He was not naive. He knew it was necessary for social life, for survival, even for sanity. The problem is not the mask itself. The problem is forgetting it is a mask. And that forgetting creeps in quietly. You start by playing a role, and at some point, you can no longer tell where the character ends and you begin. The persona is a bridge, not a home. It was meant to mediate between your inner and outer world. But if you choose to live on that bridge, you will always hang suspended between two abysses, the false acceptance of others and the true abandonment of yourself. And the body knows it. The body always knows it. The sudden illnesses with no clear cause, the unexplainable anxiety, the chronic fatigue disguised as productivity, the heaviness that lingers even after hours of rest. These are symbolic messages of the unconscious crying out, "You have lost yourself." You can continue walking through life as a polished puppet, but your unconscious will scream. It screams in dreams, in symptoms, in cycles that repeat, in relationships that collapse without reason. Because the soul, at some point, demands passage, and when it does not knock politely. It erupts from within, tearing apart the lies you've built, demanding you finally remember who you are. It is at that point where many lose their minds, fall ill, or simply surrender. Yet there is another path, a path that seems dark, yes, but one that liberates. A path where you begin, little by little, to peel away each layer of that false self, as if tearing off an old skin stuck from the inside. And it hurts. It hurts like the bleeding silence carried for decades. It hurts like a scream trapped in the throat for years. But it also frees. It frees because there is no truth more raw than being able to be who you are, even if it unsettles, even if it frightens, even if it tears down the castle you spent a lifetime building. The journey begins this way, with a silent act of courage, with a question that burns. Could it be that what I call myself is only the reflection of what others expected? And if it is, perhaps the time has come to be born from within, without disguise, without rehearsal, without an audience. The world may not be ready for it, but you are. Before continuing, have you noticed how the more broken you seem, the less respect you receive? The issue is not in feeling, but in allowing that to rule your actions. Most live as though it were normal to explode, to surrender, or to justify themselves, yet none of this inspires respect. What truly does is the control, the presence, and the calmness of one who knows exactly who they are. There is a real way to cultivate this, and it comes without detours, only through what truly works. There is something inside you that you do not want to face, an impulse you repress, a thought you condemn as wrong, a desire you conceal even from yourself. That is the part that appears when you lose control, when you erupt over something meaningless, when you sabotage yourself at the most crucial moment, when jealousy strikes towards someone you love, or when you lie without knowing why. That is what was called the shadow. But do not be mistaken. It is not only the dark side, it is everything you rejected, everything exiled from awareness, so you could adapt, be accepted, loved, respected. The shadow is not a monster. It is an abandoned part of you, and every part cast out always returns. One way or another, it always returns. You feel its presence in the voice that undermines you, in thoughts that arise from nowhere, in strange dreams, in sudden bursts without cause, in the shame you feel for liking what should not be liked. The shadow carries the rage you swallowed in childhood, the sexuality condemned as sinful, the freedom you locked away out of fear. It also holds your forgotten gifts, your silent spontaneity, your intuition crushed beneath rules. That is why the shadow is not only a threat, it is also possibility. Yet to approach it requires courage. Not the courage of untouchable heroes, but of the one who dares to look inward and whisper, "Yes, this too is me." It is in that moment the psyche begins to change, not through magic, but through a radical act of clarity. To recognize that within us there is no pure good, no pure evil. What exists is a constant dance between forces, and denying one of them means being enslaved by it. How many times have you hurt while trying to do good? How many times have you said yes to please, while deep inside you longed to say no? How many times have you felt pleasure in what was forbidden, only to drown afterward in guilt? The shadow breathes in those paradoxes. It emerges in uncontrollable jealousy, in emotional patterns you cannot explain, in choices you think are yours, but are born from a void you refuse to see. What you resist persists. The more you flee from the shadow, the greater its power. It shows itself as addiction, as compulsion, as sudden rage, as depression disguised as indifference. Yet when you dare to let it speak, something shifts. It is not a pleasant dialogue. It is like staring into a shattered, dirty mirror that nonetheless reflects something you must face. The task is not to cure the shadow, but to integrate it. It requires time, silence, listening. It is allowing the monster to speak. It is giving the instinct a voice again. It is reclaiming what was exiled out of fear of seeming inadequate. And here lives the great paradox. The shadow only stops sabotaging when it is recognized. It does not want to destroy you. It wants to be heard. It wants to remind you that you are more than the image you built of yourself. Have you ever felt a strange pleasure in doing something wrong, as if that act was liberating? Perhaps it was the shadow returning your spontaneity. Perhaps for a second, you tasted who you could be, without the invisible chains of tamed morality. But beware, integration is not surrender. It is not living through impulse. It is walking consciously inside your own darkness. It is like entering a forest at night. You will stumble. You will hear frightening noises. You will want to go back. But if you continue, you will discover that something was waiting there, a part of you, forgotten, wounded, but alive. And when you embrace it, something within aligns. The anguish softens. The weight of mistakes transforms into wisdom. You stop hating yourself and begin, little by little, to inhabit yourself. That is the work of the shadow. It is your denied side asking for a place at the table, and you can keep ignoring it, or you can do the unthinkable. Look into the eyes of that inner enemy and recognize that it may be your greatest ally. Have you ever loved someone who seemed magical? Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and felt a strange sense of reunion, as if that person revealed something you were missing? Perhaps it was more than passion. Perhaps it was an archetypal projection. Perhaps without realizing, you found your own soul disguised in the body of another. Jung described it with haunting precision. He called it anima, the image of the feminine in the psyche of a man, and animus, the image of the masculine in the psyche of a woman. Yet it is not about gender. It is about inner forces, symbolic energies that dance within each of us, asking for expression, presence, and listening. The anima connects man with intuition, with feeling, with the deep sensitivity that culture often taught him to repress. The animus, in turn, connects woman with structured reason, with firm speech, with that impulse for affirmation that for centuries was silenced. But when those forces are ignored, they do not disappear. They are projected in the form of enchantment, obsession, painful idealizations. Do you know this story? You fall in love with someone, and without noticing, you deposit in that person everything you feel you lack. He becomes the savior, the cure, the soulmate. She becomes the muse, the perfect mother, the goddess. But sooner or later, reality arrives and destroys the illusion, and you find yourself before a broken mirror, surrounded by the fragments of everything you believed was love. Jung warned, projection creates more confusion than understanding, because the other was never the real problem. What hurt was to watch the unconscious image you had placed on them collapse. And here lies the most painful secret. You never loved that person. You loved the part of yourself you saw reflected in them. The anima and the animus are like inner guides, but also traps. When unrecognized, they dominate. The negative anima may lead a man into unattainable romantic fantasies, making him inconsistent, dependent, or emotionally volatile. The negative animus can turn a woman into a fierce inner critic, harsh, perfectionist, judging everything, even herself, with cruel rigidity. But when these forces are integrated, something shifts. The man begins to feel without fear, to create with depth, to listen to his intuition as a real compass. The woman begins to express herself with firmness, to trust her logic, to act with authenticity. And in that process, love stops being a field of projections and becomes a true encounter between complete beings, not between lacking halves. Yet the journey hurts, because it requires recognizing that much of what you once called love was an escape from yourself, from your own incompleteness. How many relationships have you lived that began with euphoria and ended with resentment? How many times did you try to change the other to fit your ideal? How many times did you wait for someone to save you? And how many times did you blame the other for not being what even you did not know how to sustain? The animus and anima are masters of that game. They take you to the edge of passion and then push you off. They make you float in ecstasy and then fall into the void. But that void is not punishment. It is a call to look within, to ask yourself, what am I missing that I am trying to find in the other? The answer to that question changes everything, because you stop blaming the other and begin listening to what your soul is trying to say. Jung saw this integration as essential to the process of individuation. It is not about eliminating the masculine or the feminine within us, but about allowing both to dialogue, for logic to embrace intuition, for action to walk alongside contemplation, for doing and feeling to stop fighting for power and begin to build together. But that only happens after ruin, after disappointment, after pain, because only there, without illusion, can something true be born. You stop searching for the ideal other and begin to cultivate the possible self, not perfect, not finished, but present. And then, when a new love arises, if it does arise, it will not be an altar where you deposit your deficiencies. It will be a clean mirror where you see the other as they are, and you allow yourself to be seen, without masks, without myths, without disguises. That is the miracle of integration. When anima and animus cease to be loose archetypes in the unconscious and become conscious allies in daily life. The inner voice that once criticized now encourages. The impulse that once sabotaged now protects. And love finally becomes what it was always meant to be, a meeting of wholeness in constant construction. There comes a moment in life when everything that once worked no longer works. What once inspired you now weighs you down. What once propelled you now chains you. One day you wake up, and without explanation, everything seems without color, without cause, without ground. It is precisely at this point of the inner journey that the archetype of the hero emerges, but not the hero of children's tales, dressed in armor and glory. Jung's hero is something else. It is the inner cry that refuses to live a half-lived life. It is the part of you that perceives the absurd and still chooses to walk. The hero is born from ruin, not at the beginning of the story, but in the middle of chaos, when the persona is no longer enough, when the shadow has already revealed itself, when relationships showed more mirrors than shelters. You have already been there, on the edge of surrender. At that point, where continuing hurts, but stopping does not solve anything either, where everything seems useless except that silent will to go beyond. Even if you do not know where, it is the hero who moves you in that instant, not for glory, but for necessity. Because to stay is to die, and something within you, however small, still wants to live. But the journey of the hero is brutal. It demands descent, not ascent. Descent inward, facing inner monsters, forgotten traumas, forbidden desires, facing the truth. You are not who you thought you were, and that is devastating. Jung saw that moment as essential in the process of individuation, the call to psychic adventure. Only here, the adventure is not about external conquests, but about inner collapses. You lose friendships, move away from certainties, doubt your faith, feel like a stranger in your own life, and that discomfort is not a mistake, it is a right. The hero, before conquering anything, must lose control, lose the inflated ego, lose the illusory security of being normal. That is why so many collapse in this phase, because they confuse collapse with failure. But it is exactly the opposite. That collapse is the symbolic opening of a portal, the beginning of true rebirth. Do you know that moment when you feel you have hit rock bottom? It is there that the hero hears the first whisper of truth. Not an answer, but a question that burns. And if all of this has a meaning, I cannot yet see. That question is the torch that lights up in the middle of darkness. Then the hero begins to walk, though wounded, though in pieces, because the soul pushes forward and it does not need explanations, only surrender. The path is lonely, made of sleepless nights, silent cries, silences that scream. But along that journey, something strange begins to happen. Wounds turn into maps. Failures reveal purposes, and what once was pain becomes a tool. The hero transforms, not because he defeated something, but because he was defeated by something greater than the ego. The awareness that living with truth is costly, but living without it costs the soul. In many mythical traditions, the hero descends into the underworld. He faces dragons, ghosts, and the dead, not to destroy them, but to recover what was lost, a symbol, a truth, a forgotten part of himself. Those myths are not just ancient tales, they are psychic portraits of your own path. The dragon can be your fear, the dark cave your childhood, the challenge your broken self-image, the sword your forgotten courage. With every step, the hero carries more pain, but also more awareness. And with that, a new identity begins to be born. No longer built on what others expect, but on what you already know and can no longer ignore. Yet there is a deeper point. The true hero dies. Symbolically, he must die. Because the old ego, the one that tried to control everything, must be sacrificed so that the self may emerge. That death is silent. Sometimes it happens in the middle of the night. You look into the mirror and realize, I am no longer the same. And indeed you are not, because the hero has returned, transformed, scarred, more humble, more whole. Now he carries something sacred, the awareness that chaos has meaning, that pain teaches, that there is no light without shadow, that being human is also being broken and still continuing. That is the true victory. Not the triumph of pride, but the victory of the one who did not run away, the one who entered the hell of his own soul and came out with eyes full of truth. And the truth is simple, though unbearable. Nothing outside you will save you, but everything within you can be transformed if you have the courage to go on. So if you are at that point in the path, fallen, tired, confused, know that this too is part of the journey, and that what seems like ruin may only be the beginning of the return. After so many layers undone, the mask dropped, the shadow faced, love stripped of projections, the fall of the hero. What remains? What remains is silence, not the empty silence of surrender, but silence charged with presence. The kind of silence that only appears when all that was noise within you has screamed and finally gone quiet. It is there that the most mysterious archetype begins to emerge, the self. Carl Jung did not define it as a final goal, much less as an idealized version of the ego. The self is not an end. It is an invisible center that has always been there since childhood, since the first dream, since the first wound, since the first moment of silence, that the world did not understand, but the soul did. The self is what observes when the ego collapses. It is what survives even after all your versions have died. That in you, which never corrupted itself despite masks, pains, collapses. But to hear it, you must lose almost everything. You must release the illusion of control, the need to have all the answers, accept that perhaps there is no cure in the sense the world proposes. What exists is reconciliation, sometimes silent, sometimes painful, with what you are, not with what you show, but with what you always knew and feared to accept. The self does not manifest with euphoria. It does not shout, it whispers. It whispers when you can no longer keep pretending. It whispers when you look into the eyes of your failure and no longer feel shame. It whispers when a tear falls in the dark and you no longer try to hide it, because you finally understood that it too is part of healing. That whisper is almost imperceptible, but whoever hears it never remains the same. Jung said, The self manifests through symbols, not through ideas. Dreams appear with circles, mandalas, spirals. It appears in that sense of eternity you feel when something very simple, a song, a gesture, an encounter, pierces through you, and for a few seconds you remember that there is something greater in you, something that has always been there, something that does not need explanation, only recognition. But for that, the ego must be silent, must stop trying to prove, stop fighting for validation, stop repeating the question, who should I be? Because the self does not answer that question, it dissolves it. And when the question disappears, what remains is being. The self is not happiness. It is not constant peace. It is wholeness. The radical acceptance that everything in you has a place, that anger has a place, that doubt has a place, that even your darkness is part of the whole. When the self emerges, you do not feel enlightened. You feel present, present in the body, present in the pain, present in clarity. And that is revolutionary in a world that teaches you to run from everything you feel. The self does not promise victory, but it gives root. It anchors you in what is real. Even if the real is imperfect, contradictory, fractured, you begin to realize, I no longer need to prove anything. I no longer need to compete. I no longer need to invent a character to be accepted, because that in me, which is truest, does not depend on anyone's approval. And here, in this field of presence, love changes, creation changes, even silence changes. You begin to act not from lack, but from authentic impulse. You speak less, but with more truth. You suffer, but with dignity. You love without forgetting yourself. That is the call of the self. A call that does not come from outside, it comes from the center, from the most intimate and most neglected place in your soul. And that is why it is frightening, because it forces you to abandon everything you built in the name of approval. It forces you to live without script, without guarantees, without character, only with presence, only with surrender. But when you accept that call, something restructures. You stop running, you stop projecting, you stop begging for meaning, and you begin to listen. Listen to the body, listen to the signs, listen to the symbolic repetitions of life. Listen to the silence as if it were a teacher, and indeed it is. Jung affirmed that the self is not an attainable end. It is a continuous process of integration. Every crisis brings you closer. Every loss unmasks an illusion. Every shadow embraced gives you back a piece of the soul. The path toward the self is not a straight road, but a journey paved with symbolic deaths. First comes the death of certainty, the crumbling of the need to always know. Then comes the death of pride, the collapse of the illusion that we are somehow above others. After that, the death of the fantasy of being special, unique, in a way that exempts us from the struggles of existence. And when all of these illusions fall away, something unexpected is born. Simplicity. The simplicity of existing without spectacle, without armor, without lies. It is in this simplicity that you finally return home, not to a physical house, not to a geographic location, but to that inner dwelling, the place where you no longer need to run from yourself. You look in the mirror and you no longer see perfection, but you see truth. And that truth, raw and unpolished, is what ultimately matters. Because this journey is not about becoming a better version of yourself. It is not about polishing your image until it shines. It is about becoming whole. Wholeness is not the absence of wounds, but the recognition that even the broken pieces belong to you, that even the chaos carries meaning. If you are here, it is not by accident. Something deep within you already knew there was more. More than the roles you were taught to play, more than the desires you were conditioned to chase, more than that constant sensation of almost being someone, but never fully complete. Deep down, you have always felt the quiet call towards something greater, something more authentic than the masks you wear. Carl Jung never promised salvation. He did not offer a cure in the traditional sense. What he offered was far more unsettling and far more profound. He offered a mirror. Not a mirror that flatters the face, but one that reflects the entire soul, including the fragments you have spent a lifetime hiding. To look into this mirror is to face the archetypes, the myths, the shadows, the contradictions. And this path is not linear. It is circular, spiral-like. You begin with the mask, and without realizing it, you end up at the center. And that center was never beyond your reach. It was always you. Perhaps the most brutal, and yet the most beautiful revelation of this journey is that what you have been searching for all along never abandoned you. It was simply buried, under expectations, under guilt, under the countless voices telling you how you should be. And now, maybe for the first time, you can see that even your pain had meaning, that the chaos was not a mistake, that behind the persona, behind the shadow, behind the breakdowns and the masks, there has always been a silent force that never stopped beating. That force is you, your true self. Not the self that society shaped, but the self that your soul preserved, even in the face of absurdity. What you choose to do with this awareness is entirely your decision. But there is something you must know. Once you hear the whispers of the inner voice, you can never pretend you did not hear them. That is the beginning of a new journey. If you've made it this far, it's not simply because the subject interests you. You have stayed because something within you is shifting. Something is awakening in the silent corners of your being. And for that, I want to thank you. Not just for watching, but for remaining. For staying even when the content made you uncomfortable, even when the shadow stared directly at you, when the hero inside you fell, and when the self whispered words you don't yet know how to name. You stayed. And in this world, staying is rare. When I first encountered Jung's work, I had no idea what I was truly searching for. I only knew something was broken in the world, and even more so within myself. I felt as if I had been acting in a play written by someone else, following a script that no longer made sense. I smiled where I wanted to scream. I nodded where I doubted. I claimed to love where there was only emptiness. Until one night, I had a dream. In the dream, I walked down a long, dark hallway lined with mirrors on both sides. Each mirror reflected a different version of me. The arrogant one, the submissive one, the joker, the overly spiritualized one. Yet none of them looked me in the eye. I woke up with a silent weight in my chest, a nameless anguish. And that day, I understood. I no longer know who I am, but I know this is not all there is. And maybe you are at that same point now, standing between what was and what is yet to come, between who you thought you were and who you are now beginning to uncover, layer by layer, tear by tear. That is why I thank you for trusting this space, for allowing me to be a voice in this intimate moment of your own journey, for letting this video be more than information, for letting it become a mirror. You are not alone. What beats inside you is real, even if no one around you understands it. Even if you still feel confused, even if you are afraid. Move forward, even with doubts, but with courage, because the soul only begins to speak when the character falls silent. So thank you, truly. If you've made it this far, through mask, shadow, projection, collapse, and silence, then perhaps we no longer need to pretend. And maybe you already understand this. Feeling less is not coldness, it is strength. If this message resonated with you, make sure to subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you never miss the signs that guide your awakening. And remember, once you cross the threshold of true awareness, there is no way back, only forward into your own transformation. You are not here by coincidence. Something deep within you led you to this video at this exact moment, and by the time you finish watching it, you'll begin to understand why. True healing doesn't always feel like a sudden burst of light. More often, it feels like a whisper in the middle of chaos, a quiet murmur that emerges not from the outside, not because something in your surroundings magically shifts, but from something internal, beginning to change, beginning to come together. Healing begins the moment you stop rejecting the parts of your story you once wanted to erase. It starts when you begin to integrate everything you've been, everything you've lived through, everything you've denied or tried to silence. Carl Jung once said that we don't transform by bringing light to the shadow, but by making the darkness conscious. And it's in that very process, silent, often invisible, where the true integration of the soul begins. And even if you're not fully aware of it yet, there are subtle but powerful signs that you're already healing from that deep place within. One of the first signs is that you stop fighting with yourself, not because you're trying to force peace or convince yourself that everything is okay, but because a quiet softness begins to settle in. It's a kind of silent understanding that allows you to observe yourself without judgment, to feel without demanding constant improvement, to live within yourself without needing to constantly fix or correct who you are. Your inner dialogue begins to change. You stop punishing yourself for feeling. You no longer pressure yourself to be perfect just to earn rest. Instead, you start speaking to yourself with honesty, but also with compassion. And that compassion is not weakness. It's a gentle kind of strength that begins to dismantle all the inner walls that once kept you separated from your true self. That softness doesn't arrive all at once. It settles in gradually with every decision you make in your own favor. With every moment you choose not to punish yourself for not having all the answers, for not healing fast enough, for not reacting the way you expected to. You begin to understand that real strength doesn't lie in being invulnerable. It lies in feeling everything and still moving forward, even when the wounds are still open. The internal war that once felt endless begins to quiet, not because everything has been resolved, but because you're no longer fighting against who you are. You begin to accept that you can feel anger without losing your essence, that you can feel fear and still take steps forward, that you can fail without becoming a failure. This kind of acceptance is not resignation. It is clarity. It's the deep realization that every emotion, every wound, every denied piece of yourself forms a crucial part of your soul's map. And when you allow all of it to coexist, when you give every part of yourself space to be, something sacred happens. A silent unification between who you were, who you are, and who you are becoming begins to take place. The demands you once placed on yourself start to lose their grip. The internal judgment fades, and in its place arises a more grounded presence, one that is more real, more firm, more human. You're no longer trying to become someone new. You're starting to truly inhabit yourself. And that, in itself, is already a powerful form of healing. It's a kind of healing that doesn't need visible rituals or dramatic revelations to be real. It shows up in your everyday life, in those moments when you might have once given up on yourself, and now, instead, you choose to stay. Not to fix everything immediately, but simply to stand by your side with dignity and patience. You begin to notice that pain no longer has the same power over you. It still appears, of course, but now it comes with a different rhythm, a different volume, a different texture. It doesn't drag you under anymore. It informs you. It no longer freezes your progress. It walks with you as you keep moving. And this happens because you've stopped rejecting pain. You've come to understand that pain is not your enemy. It is a part of your story that was still waiting to be heard. Your body feels this shift too. The chronic tensions you used to carry without even questioning them start to release, slowly but noticeably. Your breathing deepens without you forcing it. Your sleep becomes more restorative, not because your life has become weightless, but because you are finally carrying your burdens from a more integrated place, a place where you no longer have to abandon yourself just to survive. Emotions that once embarrassed you no longer feel like threats. They have become legitimate expressions of who you are, expressions you can now recognize without feeling the need to correct. You can be sad without thinking you're broken. You can feel insecure without doubting your worth. You can have a bad day without believing that you've regressed. That is one of the clearest signs that you're healing through integration. The ability to hold both your light and your shadow without rejecting either. You are no longer fragmenting yourself to be liked, nor are you denying your truth to fit in. Now, you walk with all that you are, with your contradictions, your emptiness, your quiet inner victories. And that wholeness, even with its imperfections, is far more authentic than any mask of perfection you once tried to wear. Another sign is how your view of the past starts to shift. It's not about forgetting what happened or sugarcoating your pain with false positivity. It's about being able to look at your story and feel that it no longer hurts the same way. It doesn't weigh you down like before. You no longer fall apart every time a memory resurfaces. When you heal through integration, your difficult moments stop feeling like ever-present threats. They become parts of your journey that you now understand, pieces of your past that have been acknowledged. They no longer define your present. They've been folded into the story of your becoming. Not erased, not glorified, just accepted as part of the sacred whole that is you. You begin to remember, not to reopen old wounds, not to dwell in pain, but with a newfound strength that no longer allows those memories to control you. It's not that what you lived through has ceased to matter. The impact is still there. The experiences still shaped you. But now, you're no longer defined by them. You're no longer imprisoned by the version of yourself that was broken, betrayed, or afraid. You're no longer just the defense mechanism that once built walls to survive. Now, you are the one who has walked alongside every version of yourself, the wounded, the protective, the silent, the loud, and have chosen, with wisdom and love, to bring all of them together. You have made peace with your contradictions. You've chosen integration over fragmentation. You are someone who has seen the depths and, instead of turning away, has decided to honor it all and move forward with deeper awareness. Your past is no longer a punishment. It becomes something sacred, a place where you learned to hold yourself up when everything else failed you. It becomes a sacred ground that holds not just pain, but the roots of your strength. The things you once avoided looking at, the decisions you didn't want to talk about, the moments you tried to forget. Now you meet them with respect. You no longer feel the need to hide them or to feel ashamed of who you were when you didn't know the things you now know. You start to understand that all of your past selves, the quiet ones, the angry ones, the scared ones, the ones who fell again and again, they were never mistakes. They were expressions of your will to survive. They were attempts to protect your heart in a world you hadn't yet learned how to navigate. And now, from where you stand in the present, you can finally embrace all of them. Not with guilt, not with regret, but with the tenderness that you didn't know how to offer yourself back then. And that tenderness does not weaken you, it liberates you. Because only those who have made peace with their past can walk into their future with a soul that feels light, unburdened, and whole. You no longer carry your story like chains around your ankles. You carry it like threads woven into the fabric of your being. Not denying what happened, but acknowledging that through it, your soul learned exactly what it needed to remember. That understanding transforms everything. It shifts how you tell your story. You no longer speak from the wound as if it's still bleeding. You speak from the scar, soft, healed, full of memory, but no longer raw. Your story ceases to be a tragedy and becomes a journey. You no longer define yourself by what was done to you or by what you lost. You define yourself by how you chose to rise, to transform, to grow beyond the limits that pain once placed on you. And that transformation isn't loud. It's not something you shout. It's not something that needs to be explained. But it is unmistakable. People feel it in your presence. They notice the difference even if they can't name it. You radiate something calmer, something rooted. Not because you're pretending to be healed, but because you truly have begun to understand the alchemy of your own becoming. You no longer speak from open wounds, but from scars that carry wisdom. You realize, too, that forgiveness is not always about others. Sometimes it's about you. Forgiving yourself for the times you didn't protect your own heart, for the moments you stayed silent when your soul was screaming, for the instances when you abandoned what you felt, just to hold on to something or someone you were afraid to lose. And now, instead of punishing yourself, you offer yourself compassion. You understand that you did the best you could with the level of awareness you had at that time. That self-forgiveness dissolves judgment. It makes space for a new kind of gratitude, not the kind that glorifies the past or pretends it was all beautiful, but the kind that honors what it taught you. You begin to see that in the darkest places, something began to bloom. A seed of awakening was planted. That gratitude changes your energy. It doesn't make you naive. It makes you profound. You no longer carry your past as a burden. You carry it as your root system, anchoring you, grounding you, reminding you of where you come from, but never keeping you from growing. Your story is no longer a prison. It becomes your expansion. It doesn't isolate you. It connects you to others in more real and honest ways. You're not trying to be seen anymore. You're not seeking validation. You are simply sharing your truth. And that authenticity creates bridges where once there were walls. From that place, your past no longer stands between you and the world. You no longer need to hide your experiences to feel safe. You've stopped identifying solely with the pain. Now, when you speak from transformation, not from trauma. And that shift doesn't make you cold or distant. It makes you accessible, relatable, magnetic. Because people can feel when someone has walked through darkness and chosen not to live there. Your presence deepens. It becomes quieter, but more powerful. Not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you've become someone who holds their story with reverence rather than resistance. You no longer emanate confusion or denial. You emanate wholeness. And wholeness doesn't shout. It simply exists, firm, radiant, grounded. You also notice that when you revisit your past, it's not to search for blame or to justify your pain. If you return, it's with purpose. It's to gather wisdom, to close cycles, to understand patterns, to consciously close doors that were left slightly open, not as punishment, but as liberation. Nostalgia, when it comes, doesn't overpower you. You don't drown in it. You sit with it. You honor it. But you don't cling to it, because what once felt like a desperate need now feels like a part of you that has been seen, loved, and gently placed back in its rightful place. And when that happens, something inside you feels lighter. You realize you don't need to reject your past to move forward. Integration is not forgetting. It's the most loving way to evolve. You no longer push away what hurt you. You welcome it as part of your human experience, understanding that everything your soul endured was necessary to arrive here. With this clarity, with this peace, with this deeper level of consciousness. Another unmistakable sign that you're healing and evolving through deep inner integration is when you begin to act from your center rather than from reactive impulses. It's a quiet but powerful shift, one that often goes unnoticed by the outside world, but changes everything within you. This transformation is not about becoming cold or indifferent. It's about finding a grounded space inside yourself from which your actions naturally arise. When you've reconnected the fragmented parts of your inner world, you no longer feel the need to defend yourself against every challenge, explain every emotion, or prove your worth through impulsive reactions. Your energy stabilizes. Your words become more thoughtful, more deliberate. Your actions start to flow from a unified core, a place within that no longer breaks apart under pressure. You no longer react to life. You respond. And that response comes from clarity, not fear, from presence, not urgency. This is what it means to live integrated. What once overwhelmed you emotionally now meets a new version of you, a version that can observe without becoming consumed, that can feel without getting lost in the feeling. It's not that you stop feeling, it's that you learn to hold space for your emotions. You no longer need to build walls around your heart or lash out in self-protection. You stop confusing hardness with strength. Your power is no longer something you need to assert. It simply exists, quiet, calm, and steady. You maintain your center not by dominating the situation, but by staying rooted in yourself. This center, this inner stability, is not something you fake or pretend. It's not learned from a book or copied from someone else. It's the organic result of facing your inner shadows, of listening to the parts of you that used to sabotage your growth, and more than anything, of accepting them. When you make peace with your inner contradictions, your external behavior shifts. You begin to act from serenity, not from fear, from awareness, not from the need to control. And this change in frequency doesn't just affect you, it alters your entire reality. You no longer need to be right. Peace becomes more important than winning an argument. You no longer dive into conflict just to protect your ego because you finally understand. There's nothing in you that needs to be defended when you feel whole. And when all your internal parts have been acknowledged and embraced, external conflicts lose their power over you. You become quieter, but your presence speaks louder than ever. That presence doesn't push or impose. It doesn't collapse under pressure. It holds space. It accompanies. It transforms. And it does all this from a place of profound coherence. This kind of coherence isn't theoretical or performative. It doesn't come from pretending to have everything figured out. It emerges when you stop living in pieces, when you stop splitting yourself between what you feel and what you show, between what you think and what you do. Your way of being in the world transforms, not because life becomes perfect, but because you no longer filter it through the lens of past pain. You begin to exist fully, even in discomfort, without being pulled into chaos. Your energy no longer trembles at every provocation because you've stopped projecting your unhealed wounds onto the world around you. You don't hand others the power to unbalance you. Your center becomes your sanctuary, not a battlefield. And that doesn't mean you've stopped feeling. It means you now have the ability to choose how to move with what you feel. You can cry and still be at peace. You can feel afraid and still take the next step. Your emotions are no longer warnings that something is wrong. They're companions that guide you through life. You begin to understand that you don't have to react to everything, not because you don't care, but because you now recognize the value of your energy. You become unwilling to waste it on conflicts that go nowhere, on hollow conversations, or on relationships that only exist in reactive dynamics. Integration naturally makes you more selective, but not from judgment, rather from self-respect. When you learn to inhabit your own inner space, you also learn how to protect it without closing it off. You set boundaries without guilt. You speak your truth without losing your composure. This changes your presence entirely. You become someone who can hold space for others without taking on their weight, who can listen deeply without absorbing others' pain, who can express their energy without trying to dominate anyone. And that kind of presence cannot be faked. It only arises when you've made peace with every part of yourself, when there's no longer a war between your mind and your heart, between your body and your soul. You no longer need to hide your healing process. You allow yourself to honor your pace, to embrace your silences, to give space to your pauses. You stop defining yourself by your productivity or by how strong you appear on the outside. Instead, you define yourself by your integrity, by your capacity to hold yourself with compassion, without demanding perfection. You stay true to yourself, even when no one's watching. And as you continue along this path, you begin to feel a new kind of order emerging within you. Your emotions no longer compete with each other. Your decisions become firmer. The mental noise that used to dominate your thoughts begins to settle, not because it disappears entirely, but because now you can distinguish your true voice from the voices of fear and disconnection. Even your mistakes begin to take on a new meaning. You stop punishing yourself for every misstep. You stop demanding that you start over every time you stumble. Because now you see that each step, even the uncertain ones, are part of your journey. Each one is a thread in the fabric of your integration. You begin to understand yourself more clearly. And in that understanding, you stop breaking apart every time life pushes you into unfamiliar territory. From this deep self-awareness, your strength becomes grounded. You don't need to shout it or prove it. It's there. It's within you. You wear it like a second skin. And in a world that often worships appearances, this kind of authenticity becomes a sacred form of resistance. When you act from that center, you no longer lose yourself so easily. You recognize yourself even in the chaos. You know how to return to yourself without having to rebuild from scratch, because no part of you has been left behind. Every part has been called home. And in that homecoming, your soul finally finds the stability it has been seeking all along. Another powerful sign of inner transformation is when the way you connect with others begins to reflect the harmony you've cultivated within yourself. You no longer seek relationships from a place of lack, but from a place of awareness. What you once chased externally, validation, love, wholeness, you now recognize as something that already exists within you. And from that quiet sense of fullness, you choose more clearly. You no longer form bonds to fill emotional voids, but to share the richness you've cultivated inside. You stop attracting relationships that mirror the same old wounds under different disguises. Why? Because you no longer need someone else to play the part of the version of you that you were unwilling to face. Now, you can recognize your projections without shame. You don't reject them, you integrate them. You look at them with honesty, not self-blame. And in that radical honesty, you find freedom. You're no longer satisfied with half-hearted connections, not out of arrogance, but because your soul can no longer tolerate anything that stems from a mask or pretension. You crave depth, you seek presence, you yearn for real connections that breathe authenticity, even if they sometimes hurt, even if they're not always comfortable, because you've come to understand that discomfort, when born from true encounters, can also be sacred. The way you communicate begins to shift. You speak with less noise and more intention. You don't feel the need to say everything, but whatever you do express carries the weight of your integrated self, your centered presence, your unembellished truth. And that truth doesn't wound others because it doesn't come from a place of defensiveness. It simply exists. You allow yourself to set boundaries without causing harm. You give yourself permission to walk away without resentment, because you no longer cling to people who fragment you, nor do you remain in places where you must forget yourself to stay. Your internal integration starts to reflect in your external life. And in that mirror, everything that isn't mutual, balanced, or true begins to dissolve naturally. There's no need to force anything anymore. Your energy no longer supports it. This transformation becomes visible in subtle ways, in how you listen without trying to save, in how you accompany others without absorbing their pain as if it were yours to carry. You begin to choose to stay only where truth is present, and when it's not, you walk away, lovingly, guilt-free. You're no longer in relationships to fix your past. Now, you connect to grow, to evolve together, not to cover up old wounds with fleeting affection. And this shift changes everything about the quality of your relationships, because your soul no longer accepts emotional breadcrumbs, nor does it feed off shallow connections with no roots. You start to feel peaceful within yourself, even in solitude. What once felt like emptiness now becomes a fertile space. You're no longer running away from anything. You're fully inhabiting yourself. And from that place, any relationship that enters your life must resonate with that same frequency of authenticity. You're no longer manipulated by the fear of losing someone, because you've learned that you cannot lose what is truly meant for you. And when someone leaves as you stand firmly in your truth, they're not really leaving. They're revealing themselves. Your soul no longer makes silent contracts just to be loved. You no longer edit yourself to be liked. You don't lower the volume of your inner voice to avoid making others uncomfortable. And in that strength born of deep integration, your relationships become more honest, healthier, and far more real. Because when you no longer abandon yourself, you also no longer allow others to abandon you. That sacred dignity that now lives within you elevates every bond you keep. It's no longer about holding on. It's about sharing. It's no longer about needing. It's about resonating. And when your relationships begin to emerge from resonance rather than need, they become mirrors of your healing. You're no longer tangled in stories that only fed your emptiness. You now connect with people who are just as committed to their own truth as you are. There's no drama, only presence. There's no power play, only mutual respect. There's no pressure to be someone you're not, only space to be fully who you are. You discover that love, when lived from integration, doesn't seek control or external security. It seeks shared freedom. Love stops hurting, not because challenges disappear, but because you no longer place your worth in someone else's hands. You no longer wait for someone to complete you. You don't need to be rescued. You simply offer what is already full within you. Even in goodbyes, the energy is different. You no longer beg for permanence in places where growth has ceased. You no longer force yourself to stay in relationships that repeat outdated dynamics disguised as love. You walk away without bitterness. You stay without fear, because you understand that your inner peace is more valuable than any forced connection. You've realized that every relationship is a reflection of the one you have with yourself. From this place of integration, even the way you support others transforms. You no longer give advice out of a frantic need to fix things. You now know how to hold space without interfering. You respect that everyone has their own rhythm, their own timing, and their own journey of awakening. You understand that no one can do the inner work for another, that healing only arises from one's own will. You become more empathetic, but also more grounded, more loving, yet more honest. And this energy, when balanced, becomes one of the clearest signs that you are healing, not just superficially, but deeply, from the soul, from the total integration of all the parts of you that once felt fragmented. And then, something extraordinary begins to unfold, so subtly, so gently, that you almost don't notice it at first. It's not a sudden burst of joy, not the kind of high that comes from external achievement or the thrill of new beginnings. It's quieter than that, more profound. You start to feel peace, without any apparent reason. A peace that doesn't rely on your surroundings being perfect, or on every area of your life being resolved. It arises spontaneously, like a breath that slows on its own, like an inner silence that doesn't disturb you but wraps around you like a warm, invisible blanket. You're not euphoric. You're not seeking stimulation or novelty. You're simply here, fully present. And that state of presence, which once felt unreachable, like something only monks or sages might attain, now starts to feel natural, like something that was always inside you, waiting for you to notice. This peace doesn't mean you've stopped feeling pain. You still feel deeply, but now you know how to hold it. You no longer run from your emotions, deny them, or bury them deep inside. You don't identify with them either. You witness them. You stay with them gently, like a compassionate observer. And when they've served their purpose, you let them go. Naturally, lovingly. This shift brings another clarity. You begin to see the difference between what is urgent and what is truly important. You stop reacting to everything. You don't feel the pressure to prove you're making progress, because you already are. Your soul stops running. And when the soul stops running, something miraculous happens. The body begins to rest. The mind quiets. Your energy becomes lighter, more fluid, even as you continue to move through life's ups and downs. You no longer fight every discomfort. You stop resisting reality. Instead, you choose to be fully present with what is, without spiraling into judgment or fear. And then, the world starts to notice. Not because you've made an announcement, not because you've tried to convince anyone, but because your presence has changed. The way you speak, the way you look at people, the way you move, it all carries a different frequency now. You no longer feel the need to explain your healing. You no longer seek validation. What you transmit is felt deeply. And what is felt from a place of peace doesn't require proof. It simply is. In that silent recognition, you realize something even more powerful. Peace isn't the end of the path. It's the new way you walk it. You stop needing the world to align perfectly for you to feel okay. Your balance comes from within now. It is no longer fragile because it isn't built on outside conditions. It doesn't vanish with change because it's not just an emotion. It's a state of the soul that has stopped fragmenting itself. You're no longer chasing fulfillment as if it's some distant goal. You begin to realize that the wholeness you've been seeking was never outside of you. It was always within you, buried under layers of self-criticism, guilt, and abandonment. Now that you've begun the sacred work of integration, that fullness begins to rise effortlessly, like a river that's finally allowed to flow after being dammed for so long. You begin to understand that calm does not come from control. True serenity isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting yourself. And trusting yourself no longer means being certain of everything. It means being at home in your own skin, even amidst the unknown. It means you can change direction without feeling lost. You can pause without feeling like a failure. You can lack answers and still feel whole. From this place of peace, the noise of the world begins to lose its grip. External opinions no longer define your worth. The pressure that once suffocated you now feels distant, not because you've shut the world out, but because you no longer shapeshift to fit in. You no longer need to earn your place. You belong to yourself now. And that inner belonging becomes the foundation upon which everything else is built. Every action you take comes from a clearer intention. Every moment of silence becomes sacred space, no longer empty, but rich with meaning. Every connection becomes a choice, not a desperate need. This calm, this unshakable peace that supports you without explanation or performance is the most profound signal that healing is happening. Deeply, authentically, not through resistance, but through integration. If something inside you felt aligned while hearing these words, if a part of you recognized this truth, it's because you're already in the midst of this sacred process. Healing through integration doesn't mean forgetting who you were. It means embracing all of it, fully and consciously. It means letting every version of yourself, even the wounded ones, come back into wholeness. You are not broken. You are gathering your scattered pieces. And in this sacred inner gathering, the peace you once searched for out there begins to awaken within you. Silent, deep, real. If this message resonated with your soul, if you felt that it was meant for you at this exact moment in time, your awakening deserves to be witnessed. Your journey deserves to be honored. And your presence, just as it is the very gift this world needs. So if these words have stirred something within you, if even for a moment you felt seen, understood, or simply more at peace, don't let that feeling fade. This journey is just beginning, and you don't have to walk it alone. There is a whole community of souls, just like you, waking up, healing, and remembering who they truly are. Subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment of truth, light, or connection. Let this space be your reminder that you are not alone, that your process matters, and that your healing is sacred. And if this message touched your heart, share it with someone who might need it today. You never know how deeply a few words can change a life. Together, we grow. Together, we rise. And together, we return home to ourselves. Thank you for being here. Your presence is powerful, and the world is better because you're in it. Most people live their entire lives without realizing that their greatest enemy isn't out there. It lives inside their own mind. And here's the truth: no one ever tells you. You are not a victim of your negative thoughts. You are their accomplice. Every single day that you allow negativity to control your mind, you are consciously choosing a mediocre life instead of the extraordinary one you could have. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how to train your mind to think positively, not as some cheap self-help trick, but as the most powerful strategy that transformed my life and the lives of millions around the world. Let me ask you something crucial. How many times today have you spoken to yourself negatively? How many times have you thought, "I can't, it's too hard, I'm not enough," or "nothing ever works for me"? If your answer is more than once, then right now you are programming your mind for failure. And here's what's fascinating. Your subconscious mind cannot distinguish between what is real and what you tell it is real. So if you keep feeding it with negativity, it will create a negative reality. But if you learn to master your thoughts, you can literally redesign your entire life. Stay with me, because in the next few minutes, I'm going to share with you the exact inner system I've used for more than 40 years to keep my mind focused on the positive, even during the darkest moments. Let me take you back in time. Many years ago, I was a completely different man than the one you see today. I worked low-paying jobs. Some nights, I slept in my car, washing dishes in the back of a small hotel. I had no formal education beyond high school, no connections, no money, and worst of all, no hope. My mind was a battlefield of constant self-criticism. "You're a failure," said the voice inside me. "You'll never get out of this. You're not smart enough. Look at everyone else. They succeed, but you don't." Then one day, sitting in a small room staring out the window, I had a revelation that literally saved my life. I realized something profound. I was not my thoughts. My thoughts were simply mental habits I had developed over the years, and like any habit, they could be changed. In that moment, I understood that if I wanted to change my outer world, I first had to change my inner world. And that began by forcing myself, yes, forcing myself to think positively. Now I want you to understand something essential. When I speak of forcing yourself to think positively, I'm not talking about ignoring reality or pretending to be happy while everything collapses around you. I'm not talking about empty affirmations in front of a mirror while your life falls apart. That's what critics of positive thinking never grasp. True positive thinking isn't denial. It's direction. It's the conscious act of taking control of your inner dialogue and redirecting it toward possibilities, solutions, and opportunities instead of problems, complaints, and limitations. Let me explain how this works on a psychological level. Because once you understand the science of thought, everything changes. Your brain has something called the reticular activating system, the RAS. This system acts as a filter that decides what information from the outer world reaches your awareness and what gets ignored. Every second, your brain is bombarded with millions of bits of data, yet your RAS only allows in what it considers important, based on your dominant beliefs and recurring thoughts. Here's the key. Your RAS is constantly searching for evidence to confirm what you already believe. If you believe life is hard and opportunities are rare, your RAS will show you every obstacle, every rejection, every reason you can't succeed. But if you change your dominant thoughts and start looking for possibilities, solutions, and opportunities, your RAS automatically begins to reveal them. It's as if you suddenly see a completely different world, even though the world hasn't changed at all. The only thing that changed was your focus. So how do you force yourself to think positively when your entire life has been wired for negativity? The answer lies in what I call the 4 laws of deliberate positive thinking. The first law is the law of substitution. Your conscious mind can only hold one thought at a time. You cannot think of 2 things simultaneously on a conscious level. That means you can deliberately replace a negative thought with a positive one at any moment. Every time you catch yourself thinking something negative, immediately, without delay, without excuses, replace it with its positive opposite. If you think, "I can't do this," replace it with, "I can learn to do this." If you think, "This will go wrong," replace it with, "I'll find a way to make this work." Have you ever considered this? Most people let their negative thoughts run wild like untamed horses. They never stop to realize that they have the power to choose. But from now on, you will exercise that power. Every negative thought that enters your mind will be replaced immediately. At first, this requires conscious effort, I admit, but after a few weeks of consistent practice, it becomes automatic. Your mind begins to reject negative thoughts on its own, like a mental immune system. The second law is the law of positive visualization. Your subconscious mind thinks in images. When you think in words, your subconscious instantly converts them into mental pictures. And here's what's crucial. Your nervous system cannot distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. This means that when you visualize something with deep emotion, your brain literally begins to create neural pathways as if it had already happened. Carl Jung taught that imagination is not fantasy. It is the bridge between the conscious and the unconscious mind, the inner workshop where reality begins to take form. I have seen countless individuals, leaders, creators, dreamers, use this truth to transform their lives. They dedicate time each day to visualize their goals as if they were already achieved. They see themselves succeeding, feeling the emotions of accomplishment, living the reality they once desired. So when the moment to act arrives, their mind no longer hesitates, because it has already walked that path many times in imagination. I practice this every morning without fail. Before getting out of bed, I spend 5 to 10 minutes visualizing my perfect day. I see myself confident, energized, productive. I see myself completing my most important tasks with calm precision. I see myself interacting positively with others. And when I open my eyes, it feels as if my mind already knows exactly what to do, because we have rehearsed it together. Imagine how your life would change if you applied this every morning. Instead of waking up and letting your mind wander through worry and anxiety, you immediately take control and direct your thoughts toward the person you want to become and the life you want to live. This simple act, done consistently, has the power to reshape your entire reality. The next principle Jung emphasized is the power of directed affirmation. Many people say, affirmations don't work. I've repeated positive phrases and nothing changed. And they're right. Mere words do nothing. But when affirmations are combined with intense emotion, constant repetition, and congruent action, they become one of the most powerful tools to reprogram the subconscious mind. The secret lies in how you formulate them. An effective affirmation must be present tense, positive, personal, and emotionally charged. Instead of saying, I want to be successful, say, I am successful, and every day my success expands. Instead of, I hope to be financially free, say, I am financially free, and abundance flows toward me from many sources. Do you see the difference? The present tense tells your subconscious that this is already your reality. But here's the hidden truth Jung would insist upon. The subconscious only accepts what is felt deeply. When you repeat your affirmations, you must feel them in every cell of your body. You must generate the emotional state of someone who has already achieved what they affirm. Without emotion, words are only empty echoes in your mind. I have a list of 10 affirmations that I repeat every morning and every night, aloud, with conviction, with energy, with complete certainty that they are true. After years of doing this, those affirmations became my reality. Not because they are magical, but because they transformed my beliefs, and my beliefs transformed my actions, and my actions transformed my life. Try it this week. Write down 3 powerful affirmations about the areas of your life you want to improve: your health, your finances, your relationships, your purpose. Write them in the present tense, as if they were already real. Then, without fail, repeat them every morning and every night for the next 30 days. You will witness changes that will astonish you. Jung also spoke of the law of mental nourishment. Let me ask you something. If every day you ate junk food, sugar, and processed fat, would you expect a healthy, energetic body? Of course not. We all understand that we are what we eat physically, yet few realize that we are also what we consume mentally. Your mind is constantly being fed by the world around you. Every conversation, every show, every song, every book, every post is depositing something into your subconscious. And if most of what you consume is negative, violent, pessimistic, or filled with drama, your mind is being slowly poisoned. Years ago, I made a radical decision. I stopped watching the news, stopped spending time with negative people, stopped consuming entertainment that left me feeling worse. Instead, I began to feed my mind with positive, educational, and inspiring material, books on personal growth, stories of people who overcame adversity, teachings about consciousness and inner mastery. That single decision changed my destiny. My mind became a fertile garden where only constructive and luminous thoughts could grow. And when your mind is clean and focused, you make better choices, see opportunities where others see obstacles, and attract people and circumstances that align with your higher vibration. So ask yourself, what would happen if you started today to be extremely selective with what you allow into your mind? What if for the next 30 days, you only consumed content that made you wiser, stronger, more peaceful, more aware. I assure you, in a month, you would be an entirely different person. Jung understood that positive thinking is not about ignoring darkness. It's about consciously choosing light. It's not a tool for comfort. It's the foundation of every significant transformation in life. Every great human achievement began with someone who dared to think beyond the limits of fear and doubt. The Wright brothers dreamed of flight when everyone said it was impossible. Edison pursued the idea of light after 10,000 failed attempts. Martin Luther King envisioned equality when the entire system stood against him. Nelson Mandela held on to freedom during 27 years of captivity. These were not naive dreamers. They were conscious creators who refused to let external conditions dominate their inner world. And you carry that same power within you. No matter how broken your present reality may seem, no matter how many defeats you have endured, or how distant your dreams feel, right now you have the ability to make a decision that can transform everything. The decision to direct your mind toward light instead of darkness. Carl Jung said that the mind is both the prison and the key, and that the moment we choose to observe our thoughts consciously, we begin to shape a new destiny. Let me tell you a story. There was once a man, I'll call him Roberto. When he attended one of my sessions, he was bankrupt, heartbroken after a painful divorce, and had just lost the business he built for 15 years. He sat in the front row with empty eyes and a slouched posture, his spirit clearly broken. During the break, he approached me and said, "I used to be a positive person, but after everything I've been through, I just can't pretend anymore. Life hit me too hard." I looked at him and replied, "You're right. You can't pretend, but you can choose again. You can rebuild your mind, one thought at a time." I told him not to fake happiness, but to reclaim the only thing still under his control, his mental response. I gave him a simple exercise. Every night before sleeping, he had to write down 3 good things that happened that day, no matter how small. And every morning, he had to write 3 things he was grateful for. Just 6 lines a day. 3 months later, he wrote me an email. The first 2 weeks were hell. His mind resisted, rebelled, mocked the process, called it stupid. But he persisted. Slowly, his perception began to shift. He started noticing small opportunities that had always been there. He met people who offered help. Ideas for a new business emerged. His energy returned. His confidence rebuilt itself. Today, 5 years later, Roberto has a more successful business than before, is happily remarried, and tells me that crisis was the best gift life ever gave him, because it forced him to rebuild himself from the inside out. And it all began with the simple act of consciously choosing one positive thought at a time. But there's something deeper you must understand about positive thinking. It's not about pretending everything is fine when it isn't. Anyone can be positive when life flows smoothly, when the bank account is full, when health is good, when relationships are easy. The true strength of the mind is revealed when everything collapses, when odds are against you, when every outer voice screams, "Give up." In those dark moments, you must demand from yourself to find meaning, to look for the hidden lesson, to discover the seed of opportunity buried inside the pain. Because there is always an opportunity. Always. But it only reveals itself to those whose inner vision has been trained to see beyond appearances. And that inner vision is trained through deliberate, consistent, conscious thought. Write this down and keep it close. Within every crisis lies a blessing equal or greater than the challenge itself. This is one of the universal laws Jung spoke about, the law of polarity. But it only activates when you awaken your mind to search for it. If you panic, if you surrender to despair, if you let your thoughts spiral into fear, you'll never see it. But if you hold your mind steady, focused, open to solutions, doors will appear where before there were only walls. Over the years, I've called this the compound effect of positive thought. It works exactly like compound interest in finance. One single positive thought may seem insignificant. Two may seem irrelevant. But when you repeat thousands of positive thoughts, day after day, week after week, month after month, something extraordinary happens. Your entire personality begins to transform. You become magnetic. People are drawn to you because you emit a different frequency. Opportunities begin to unfold in ways that seem magical. But it isn't magic, it's consciousness expanding. Your health improves because your stress diminishes. Your relationships deepen because you communicate from abundance instead of fear. Your financial situation rises because your mind, now attuned to possibility, begins to make wiser, higher-level decisions. This is the real secret shared by the most successful minds. Not luck, not connections, not talent, but the ability to hold their consciousness aligned with creation instead of destruction. Carl Jung once said that the world will ask you who you are, and if you don't know, it will tell you. The greatest individuals of history, from leaders to visionaries, all mastered one inner art, the discipline of directing their thoughts toward what builds, not what breaks. The human mind is the ultimate alchemist. It can turn any suffering into wisdom, any loss into rebirth, any shadow into light. And that, more than anything else, is the power you already hold. The power to rebuild your world from the inside out, one conscious positive thought at a time. These are not extraordinary people. They are individuals who applied the same principles I'm sharing with you right now. And you can do exactly the same. You don't need special circumstances. You don't need an exceptional IQ. You don't need powerful connections. All you need is the will to take control of your mind and force it to work for you instead of against you. Now let me give you a clear plan of action that you can start implementing today. This is what Carl Jung called the 30-day mental transformation program. If you follow it with absolute discipline over the next 30 days, your life will become almost unrecognizable by the end of that period. Step 1. Every morning, right after waking up, before checking your phone, before speaking to anyone, before thinking about your problems, spend 10 minutes doing the following. 5 minutes of positive visualization, where you see yourself achieving your most meaningful goals. 3 minutes repeating your affirmations with deep emotion. 2 minutes writing down 3 things you are grateful for in this moment. Step 2. During the day, every time you catch yourself having a negative thought, stop immediately and use what Jung described as the law of substitution. It doesn't matter how many times you need to do it. If it's 100 times, then do it 100 times. This is mental training. And like any training, it's hard at first, but over time, it becomes natural. Step 3. For the next 30 days, eliminate every unnecessary source of negativity from your life. Turn off the news. Walk away from toxic conversations. If someone wants to complain to you, politely change the topic or remove yourself. This is not coldness. It's protection of your most valuable asset, your mental state. Step 4. Every night before going to bed, spend 5 minutes reviewing your day and finding what was good about it. Even if it was a terrible day, find at least 3 positive things that happened or 3 lessons you learned. Your subconscious mind is most receptive in those moments right before sleep, so the last thing it should receive is positive thoughts. Step 5. Read at least 20 pages of a positive, educational, or inspiring book every day. That's about 30 minutes of reading. Do this for 30 days, and you'll have finished a full book that will reshape your perspective. Do it for a year, and you'll have read 12 books, and you'll find yourself in the top 1% of your field. Step 6. Surround yourself with positive people. Actively seek individuals who are growing, who have goals, who are optimistic about the future. Their energy is contagious and will lift you up. As the old proverb says, "Show me your friends, and I'll show you your future." This program may seem simple, even too simple, but therein lies its power. It's not the complicated methods that change lives. It's the simple disciplines practiced consistently every single day. The problem is that most people never commit to consistency. They do something for 3 days, see no miraculous results, and quit. But true transformation takes time. It requires patience. It requires faith in the process, even when there's no visible evidence of progress. Think of a bamboo tree. When you plant its seed, you water and care for it every day. The first year, nothing. The second year, nothing. The third, still nothing. The fourth, nothing yet. But in the 5th year, suddenly, the bamboo grows 30 meters in 6 weeks. It didn't grow in 6 weeks. It grew through 5 years of invisible root development underground that finally allowed that explosive growth. Your mental transformation works exactly the same way. In the first days, weeks, or even months, you might not see major external changes, but beneath the surface, in your subconscious, new neural pathways are forming, old limiting beliefs are being erased, and new programs of success are being installed. And then, suddenly, everything changes. Opportunities appear, solutions reveal themselves, doors open, and it will seem like luck. But in truth, it is the inevitable result of your consistent inner work. And there's one more thing Carl Jung wanted you to understand about positive thinking. It isn't selfish, it's an act of service. When you elevate your mental state, you don't just benefit yourself, you uplift everyone around you. Your family thrives because you're more present, patient, and loving. Your colleagues gain because you bring solutions instead of problems. Your community grows because you become an example of what's possible. The world heals because you add light instead of darkness. One of the greatest mistakes people make, Carl Jung explained, is believing that self-work is selfish. Shouldn't I focus on helping others instead of working on myself? They ask. But you cannot give what you don't possess. If your cup is empty, you cannot fill anyone else's. When you fill your own cup with positive thoughts, elevated energy, mental clarity, and purpose, it overflows naturally. Your impact multiplies effortlessly. So when you commit to thinking positively, don't do it just for yourself. Do it for your family, who deserves your best version. Do it for your children, who are silently learning from your example. Do it for the lives you will touch once you become who you are destined to be. But let's be honest, this journey won't always be easy. There will be days when your mind rebels, when negativity seems overwhelming, when you want to give up and return to old patterns. Those days will come, I promise you. But in those dark moments, remember this: comfort is the enemy of growth. If it were easy to maintain a positive mindset, everyone would do it. But most don't. Most people take the path of least resistance, surrender to negativity, and live lives of quiet despair. But you are not most people. The very fact that you're here, listening to this, tells me that you're different. You're someone who seeks more, someone who understands that an extraordinary life requires paying the price of constant awareness over your inner world. Now, before we finish, let's do something together. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine yourself 1 year from now. You've practiced these principles daily, without fail. You've trained your mind to think positively, even through the hardest moments. You've protected your mental state as if your life depended on it, because it does. Now see yourself, how you look, how you feel, what you've achieved, how your relationships have evolved, what your energy feels like, what new opportunities surround you. Can you see that version of yourself? That person exists. That person is your inevitable future if you choose wisely today. Understand this deeply. That future version of you depends entirely on the present you making the right decision now. Every choice you make today is either creating or destroying that future reality. And the most important choice you can make right now is to commit completely to mastering your mind. If you found value in this message, I ask you to do 2 things. First, subscribe to this channel and activate notifications. I'm committed to creating content that helps you reach your full potential, and I don't want you to miss what's coming. Every week, I share tested principles and tools that can dramatically accelerate your success. Second, and more importantly, take immediate action. Don't let this be just another inspiring message you hear and then forget. Commit right now to your own 30-day mental transformation. Write down the actions you'll take. Schedule them. Tell someone about your decision to create accountability. Because here's the ultimate truth Carl Jung wanted us to remember. Your life won't change just because you listen to this. Your life will change because you acted on what you learned. Knowledge without action is mere entertainment, but knowledge with action becomes transformation. You've reached a turning point. You can continue living as you always have, letting your mind be ruled by external circumstances, reacting to life instead of creating it. Or you can take control, discipline your thoughts, and start designing the extraordinary life you deserve. The choice is yours. No one can make it for you. No one can do the work for you. But I can tell you with absolute certainty that if you make this decision, if you commit fully to mastering your mind, if you discipline yourself to think positively no matter what, your entire life will change in ways you can't yet imagine. Remember this, you are one decision away from completely transforming your life. Decide now. Act today. The extraordinary future you desire is waiting for you, but it won't come looking for you. You must go and claim it. And it all begins with one single positive thought, followed by another, and another, and another, until positive thinking becomes your natural state. I have worked with countless individuals throughout my life. I have witnessed transformations that defy logic. I have seen people rise from despair to abundance, and if they could do it, so can you. I have witnessed people once consumed by illness completely restore their health. I have seen marriages on the verge of collapse transform into deep, passionate unions. I have seen those lost in despair rise to become luminous guides for others. And every one of these transformations began in the same sacred place, within the decision to take control of their inner world. Carl Jung taught that transformation begins not by changing what surrounds you, but by confronting what lives within you. You hold power now, not tomorrow. Not when life feels easier, not when you have more time or more resources. Right now, in this very breath, the power to alter your existence lies within your mind. And all you must do is consciously exercise that power, day after day, thought after thought. When you wake up tomorrow morning, before your mind begins its habitual wandering toward worry and fear, seize control. Begin your day with gratitude. Begin with awareness, with visualization, with thoughts that empower your being. Watch how those first 10 minutes determine the vibration of the next 24 hours. And when challenges appear, as they always do, remember this: your reaction is the only part that truly matters. You cannot control the outer world, but you can master your perception of it. Within that mastery lies the ultimate freedom Jung spoke of, the freedom to choose the meaning of your experience. True freedom is not the possession of all things. It is the serenity of the soul, regardless of circumstance. It is the ability to remain calm, creative, and luminous, even when the outer world trembles. That is the liberation born from inner alignment, the art of living from the inside out, rather than being enslaved by what happens outside of you. I want to share one final story. Years ago, I met a 72-year-old man after one of my talks. With tears in his eyes, he said, "I have spent my whole life worrying about things that never happened, doubting myself, and living in fear. It's too late for me." I took his hands and said, "It is never too late. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. You may have 20, 30, or even 40 years ahead. Will you live them the same way, or will you choose differently?" That man made a choice. He began to practice these principles daily, not with blind faith, but with devotion. 2 years later, he wrote to me. He had launched the business he once feared to start, reconciled with his children after decades of silence, and felt more alive than ever before. He ended his letter saying, "I only regret not learning this 50 years earlier, but I am deeply grateful to have learned it now." It does not matter how old you are, how long you've been trapped in negative thought patterns, or how many times you've failed to change. This very moment offers you the doorway to begin again, to cleanse the canvas of your mind and design your life anew. Know this: I believe in you. I believe in your capacity for transformation. Everything you need already lives within you. You do not need more talent, luck, or perfect conditions. You only need the decision to direct your thoughts consciously and to hold that decision no matter what arises. The universe mirrors the quality of your dominant thoughts. When you shift your thinking, you shift your vibration. When you shift your vibration, you alter what life sends your way. And when you alter what you attract, your entire existence transforms. It is a simple yet sacred process, and it works unfailingly for those who apply it with discipline and consistency. So here is my final challenge for you. For the next 7 days, devote your mind completely to positive thought. Just 7 days, 1 week of conscious awareness, and you will begin to witness the extraordinary truth that Carl Jung tried to teach humanity, that when the inner world changes, the outer world has no choice but to follow. Do not allow a single negative thought to remain unchallenged. Replace it instantly. Nourish your mind only with what uplifts it. Speak words that build rather than destroy. Envision outcomes that lead to success. And at the end of those 7 days, observe how you feel. Notice what has shifted within you and around you. Carl Jung would say that what you will witness is not luck, but the manifestation of your inner transformation. You will see results powerful enough to inspire you to continue. And when you complete those first 7 days, go for another 7 and then another. Soon, 30 days will have passed, then 90, then an entire year. And when you look back, you won't believe the person you've become or the reality you've created. This is your moment. This is your chance. Don't let it fade. Don't postpone your greatness. Do not wait for the perfect moment, because the perfect moment is now. Take action. Take command of your mind. Discipline your thoughts toward the positive, and prepare yourself for a transformation that will surpass your wildest expectations. Thank you for being here. Thank you for investing your time in personal growth. And thank you for having the courage to seek a higher version of yourself. That courage reveals the depth of your character and the vastness of your potential. I'll see you in the next video, where we will continue this journey of transformation together. Meanwhile, remember this profound truth from Carl Jung. Your outer world is always a reflection of your inner world. Change what is within, and the world outside will have no choice but to change as well. Now go, take action, live with intention, think with purpose, and create the extraordinary life that has been waiting for you since the day you were born. Remember, you are always one decision away from completely transforming your life. Decide now. Act today. Your best life is already waiting for you.